Welcome to the New England Football Show presented by Mortgage Right. I'm your host, John Sirenides, and as always, I'm joined by my partner, Kevin Stone. And tonight, we're joined by our good friend, Alex Barth from 98.5, The Sports Hub. Alex, good to see you, man. How you doing this evening?
Good. Thanks for having me, guys. Good to be here.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you taking the time, man. And as always, we do want to remind you guys that if you're in the market to purchase your first home, purchase your next home, or refinance your current home, give our good friend Herb Devine a call, 781-254-2846. You can also shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. With over 27 years of experience, he has the knowledge and the know-how to help you get into the right program to make your next purchase. If you are ready to move forward, then you need to give him a call or shoot him an email. He and his team are available anytime, including nights and weekends. All right, gentlemen, of course, big news of the day, and it dropped this evening. The Patriots make official what we've known all along, that Josh McDaniels is probably going to be their offensive coordinator. They named him offensive coordinator for the third time. This will be his third stint as the offensive coordinator in New England. And I want to start there, Alex. Just some general thoughts. I know over the weekend you had shared your opinions about him as a play caller and play sequencing. Thoughts on the hire? Like it, don't like it, and why?
I think it's a good hire. I kind of wanted to see if, Mike Vrabel might try to go out and find his own Ben Johnson, right? The next hot offensive coordinator candidate. They interviewed Grant. I'm blanking on his name. The guy Udinsky from Minnesota. And I mean, he's probably a little young. He's probably a step or two away, but a guy like that, I look at, and that would have been like my peak hire, but I don't think McDaniel's a bad hire at all. He's proven he can do it in this league. He's a quarterbacks guy. I think it's funny when people talk about the Josh McDaniels offense this, the Josh McDaniels offense that. The Josh McDaniels offense is pretty all-encompassing. And that's the biggest draw about him to me, besides the fact that you don't have to worry about him leaving and having turnover. If he gets another head coaching shot, it's not going to be for a long time. And by then, Drake May's off and running. But it's all in his bag. He can do it all. He's shown us he can do it all to varying levels. We know the Brady stuff, obviously saw that for over a decade, but people forget the 2020 year, there's a little bit of a quarterback run game this year. And I've said this, if I had interviewed him, one of my biggest questions would have been, how much can you build out what you did with Cam in 2020? Is there more to that? Because Drake May running needs to be a part of this offense. I get why some people don't like him. Look, he's not perfect. His play sequencing does kind of get annoying sometimes. He's maybe a little more reliant on screen passes than he needs to be. But at the end of the day, you look at his issues. You look at what'll grind your gears about him. And you look at some of these other offensive coordinators around the league and what they're doing and what the Patriots have been through the last few years with their offense coordinators. Even with his faults, Josh McDaniels makes it work significantly more often than not. They had the 6th ranked scoring offense in the league with a rookie Mac Jones in 2021. So this is a guy kind of like with Mike Vrabel. He's going to give you a really solid floor. And maybe the ceiling isn't quite there if they'd kind of ventured out a little bit, but a high floor is kind of what this team needs right now. I think he's a good hire for Drake May. I think he's a good hire for the offense as a whole. I'm not totally worried about Drake May switching systems because I think he's a smart kid, especially when it comes to football. So I like it. There's nitpicks to it, but overall it's a good hire.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you can nitpick with any hire, right? So I'm with you there. The only thing is the last, we'll call it 48 hours, when the name Chip Kelly came out, I was very intrigued. I texted both of you. I believe I texted both of you right away. I love the idea of it. I don't know how realistic it ever was, but that intrigued me. But overall, it's hard not to like this hire. Again, Alex, you mentioned most of it. He's proven, and if nothing else, I think this year more than anything proved you need people in the building that know what they're doing, that have been there, done it, have faced all sorts of situations that they can coach Drake May through, all that stuff. So I'm in on it, and you mentioned the stability of it. Yes, you still need to have a succession plan at some point, but you don't need that for a while now. You don't have an up-and-comer coming in who's going to be gone in 2 years. So you don't have to necessarily mold someone underneath him yet. You should, but it's not, day one priority for them as well. So I think this checks a ton of boxes.
I think it's a great hire. I couldn't have been happier. This is who I felt they should have hired all along. Look, we're living in a time now, and I said this the other day on X about we're all prisoners of the modern West Coast offense now, right? And everybody wants to do what McVay is doing, or Shanahan is doing, or McDaniel is doing. But the reality is, when you look at this Patriot offense during Belichick's tenure here, the one thing you could say about it, and Alex, you talked about this to start, is the flexibility of the system. It's flexible. It's game plan specific. I really, truly, genuinely believe we're going to see facets of this offense that we haven't seen in previous iterations of it. I think you're going to see an RPO game. You're probably going to see more motion. You're going to see more creativity. But let's not pretend like this offense didn't have those things, because it did. It did do a lot of those things. And yeah, when it comes to play sequencing, you can have a gripe with any play caller in the league. But the bottom line is, I think what he brings to the table is what this team needs right now. Continuity, stability rather. You both said it. He's going to be here for a while. They needed that. And don't think that wasn't arguably the biggest reason why they ultimately chose him, is that they know, hey, we're probably going to get 3 or 4 years out of him being here as our offensive coordinator. And quite frankly, he's burned enough bridges around the league. Even if he does a great job with Drake May and develops him into a top 5 guy, he may still not get another shot. He does tend to rub people the wrong way as a head coach. He doesn't have the greatest reputation. So I love the hire. I know a lot of people wanted them to go in a different direction, new philosophy. But what is that new philosophy? If you hire Grant Udinski, he comes in, he brings that Kevin O'Connell West Coast offense. You were doing that last year. That system did not fit that personnel last year, and it doesn't fit Drake May. I think a more multiple offense where you could do a lot of different things could really be good for Drake May's development. I think the other thing to keep in mind here is a lot of people make a big deal about the route tree and the concepts in this Patriots, whatever you want to call it. I call it the East Coast offense just for shits and giggles, but if you want to call it Earhart Perkins, whatever you want to call it, people talk so much about the route adjustments for the receivers and being on the same page with Brady and how hard it was. If you take that out of the equation, look, I ran a lot of that stuff at the high school level because it's simple. We didn't do the route adjustments like they did, but we ran a lot of that their base passing game. You can run at any level. It's fantastic, and I think that is going to help Drake May in his development. It's going to bring him back to what he played in at North Carolina in a spread offense. With the modern West Coast offense, there's a lot of route bleeding. There's a lot of route stacking. A lot of the route concepts don't necessarily make sense to young quarterbacks. This is going to make sense. These route concepts are going to be spaced out better, and I think that's going to help May. I love the hire. Look, there are a lot of people on social media tonight that are surprised by it. Like, what are you surprised about? We knew as soon as Vrabel got hired that the next big hire was going to be McDaniels. I don't see how anybody could be surprised. What do you want to see from him schematically in terms of the offense and helping Drake May develop?
Well, it's something you touched on, John, there at the beginning, which is I want to see, and McDaniels has been good at this, but I still think it's a point that deserves to be said. I want to see Josh McDaniels tailor his core concepts to Drake May's skill set and not try to fit Drake May into the Brady offense. And he's been good about that. He did that with Cam Newton. He did it with Mac Jones.
And I think you bring up a great point, Alex, about Cam Newton. I don't think people give him enough credit for how much he changed the offense that year.
That team, Cam, look, love Cam as a player, and he was an absolute pleasure to cover. He really was. I enjoyed that year a lot more than I probably should have for what that team was, but he was done. He didn't have anything left in the tank. Their number one receiver after Julian Edelman blew out his knee 3 weeks in, 4 weeks in, whatever, was Damiere Byrd. Their number one tight end was Ryan Izzo. These were not guys that were playmakers. These were bottom of the roster guys at best.
That was a bad skill group.
and
Damiere Byrd.
They were still able to get up and down the field, at times enough. What he did with rookie Mac Jones, I would say he built the offense to Mac Jones almost to a fault, because I think a lot of the reason that, you hear about him being a screen merchant is people remember how screen heavy they were in 2021. Well, look at what happened the next year when Matt Patricia came in and tried to throw the ball down the field. Mac Jones couldn't do it. So I do think Josh McDaniels will tailor it to Drake May, but I think it's an important point that he does. And what does that look like? Taking advantage of Drake May's ability to throw between the numbers, leveling, layering concepts, making all three levels available more often than not. I already talked about getting that quarterback run game involved and not just doing what he did, because it's a little different. Cam Newton's a tank, right? Cam Newton's like 240, 6'6", 245. Drake May's not that big. He's more agile. You can use some of those core concepts and tailor them a little more towards Drake May, stuff like that. Add an RPO package. The big one to me is going to be, where's the balance between under center and shotgun? Because we know Josh McDaniels likes to go under center. Drake May prefers to be in the shotgun. How's that going to that's the one spot where I wonder if Josh McDaniels kind of tells Drake May, no, this is going to be more my way. But it just, playing to the strengths we saw Drake May show last year and building the offense around those, I think is the best way to do it.
Well, you touched on everything schematically. I can't really add more to that. What I'm more interested in is how the dynamic between him and Vrabel. How do they get along? Whenever Josh was here, he always answered to Bill. Now he's answering to Mike Vrabel. How does that work? And I'm fascinated by really training camp. What does that look like early on when they're trying to implement everything and everything like that? So that the relationship dynamic to me, I guess sort of plays a factor into what kind of offense they're running as well. So
you talk about Josh being the head coach, being the, answering to Vrabel, but we heard him talked about as the head coach of the offense. And if Vrabel's going to be this overseer,
right out of my mouth.
Yeah. So look, could there be friction? Absolutely, especially if
there's going to be friction. There always is, even if it's a guy you like and get along with.
Right.
So especially because there's a chance early on they're going to lose some games 14-10, 17-13, things like that. But I think as long as Drake May's continuing to develop, it'll be enough.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to keep in mind here is as far as the under center shotgun conversation is concerned, I think part of the reason why McDaniels was also hired was because he is going to blend man gap run schemes with zone run schemes. And I think that's important. You don't see enough of that. In the modern West Coast offense, it's so outside zone heavy and it's so mid zone heavy and it's so bluffing and sealing the backside, doing all those things. It's so duo heavy that you don't run enough man gap. Shanahan and McDaniel do. And I think that keeps teams off balance. But the McVay version of that offense, which is what the Patriots in essence ran last year, the Stefanski-Childress version of that offense, they don't do enough of that. And I think what you're going to see here, and this is yet another reason why I like this hire from an X&O coaching standpoint, is they're going to run man gap principles as well. You're going to have your one back power, your two back power. You're going to have your toss, your crack toss. And then you're going to have your outside zone. You're going to have your duo. So you're going to have a nice variety in the run game. I wouldn't mind seeing them mix in some pistol. Alex, you talk about running Drake May.
I wanted that was me all off season last year, was saying, can we please get some pistol in here?
Yeah, and because go look at Baltimore. What pistol does for you, and Greg Roman's offense is so good at this, what pistol does is if he opens front side and tables the ball, he can read that front side end now, and you can run duo, and he can get the back and get downhill right now. But if that end starts getting nosy and he starts playing that feather technique and he starts sinking, now Drake May is a good enough athlete. He can pull it and go. You mentioned him not running a lot of the same stuff that he ran with Cam Newton. No, I don't want them running quarterback power with Drake May, because if you run that enough times, he's going to get hurt. I mean, he's a tough kid, but I wouldn't put him in harm's way like that. But you can run a lot of that read stuff with a bluffer. You can do all of that stuff and get something out of him beyond just being a traditional quarterback. So I think you're going to see a lot of that stuff. I know that people around here, particularly our friends in the media, have been clamoring for more RPOs. I think you're going to see a lot of that stuff. But I still think at its core, this is going to be that. Again, I like calling it this. I'm not trying to be different, but I really do think it's a different type of scheme. It's going to be that East Coast offense we're used to seeing with the Patriots. You're going to see the slot heavily involved again. They're going to emphasize slot receivers. You're going to see the three-step game emphasized again, which I thought was a problem last year. I didn't think they threw enough three-step, particularly outside the hashes. I think you're going to see more of that this year. I think it's going to be a really good blend. Now, it's interesting.
Just to go back to the run game real quick. It's not X's and O's, but it's a strategic thing. They've been splitting carries just on stamina or assignment between their running backs the last few years. It's just, all right, this is Ramondre's drive. This is Antonio Gibson's drive, right? Just kind of picking and choosing. I would assume with McDaniels coming back, I would think we're going to get back to early down and passing down backs. So I think that will help Ramondre Stevenson.
Yeah,
he's been overworked the last few years. That's been blatantly clear the way he's fallen off late in these seasons. They are maybe Antonio Gibson's that third down back. Maybe we see them go get a true passing down back in free agency or in the draft, something like that. It is a little more predictable, but if you execute it at a high level, it gives you more opportunities. It gives you more options. So I've always been a fan, if you have the personnel, of splitting carries by situation rather than by drive or just by stamina. So I'm excited to see that come back too. Like, we can start talking about, I like people roll their eyes at this, but like the next James White, right? You talked about they're going to emphasize the slot, and you're going to hear a lot of people through this draft cycle say, well, this is your Julian Edelman. This is your Wes Welker. And they are going to need to find that guy. I don't think it's going to be Jalen Polk. I think it's who they wanted it to be, but I don't think it's him. I think it's too little, too late there. But along with finding your Edelman or your Welker or your Troy Brown, right? They are going to find their Kevin Falk, their James White, their Danny Woodhead, their Shane Vereen. I'm excited to see that roll back in the offense too.
Sorry, real quick to that point, Alex, do they not have that guy already? At least the receiver in Pop?
They might. You got to be really durable to play that role in New England, right? We know that the old story
of get the crap kicked out of you in the middle of the field a lot.
It was the old joke when Wes Welker was a kid, he got hit by a bus, he got up, got on the bus and went to school, something like that, right? It's just about the toughness of that position. So look, Pop's a tough kid, but he's had his issues with injuries, especially with concussions. So I think you give him a shot, but he's got to be able to like stay on the field and maintain that for 17 games.
And do you both think we're getting the fullback back? I know that first day. Yeah. I mean, it feels like it's a no-brainer, no?
I think the only
I don't know if I'd say it's a no-brainer.
Okay.
I don't know if they're going to want to commit a roster spot. You would think, right? Because back during the second part of the dynasty, you had Devlin and you had Jakob Johnson, but if they could find a third tight end that can fill that spot potentially and maybe not necessarily wear an 80s number, I think that would be their preference because it gives them more roster flexibility, if nothing else.
Well, I wonder if like Jaheim Bell, if they try to turn Jaheim Bell into that guy.
But I think that's a great point.
Especially early on here, John, it's not like they got a ton of talent they're trying to cram into these 53 spots. Like they have some flexibility. So maybe it evolves to that, but I'm expecting to see a fullback on the roster. I'll actually give you a name. Robbie Oots from Alabama, who kind of is the guy you just described, John. Yeah. 6'2", 270. He plays tight end at Alabama. That's what he's listed as.
But he'd be a fullback in the NFL.
Yeah. And he's talked about that. He gave an interview a couple months ago and said, like, yeah, I know I'm probably a fullback at the next level. So that's absolutely a guy that could handle a James Devlin type of role with maybe a little more involvement in the pass game. He's somebody I'd be fascinated to see them bring in. And you probably wouldn't need, it's a guy you can take in the 6th, 7th round.
And you look at what the Harbaughs are doing in LA and Baltimore, respectively.
Patrick Ricard is a good comp.
And Matlock, Justin Matlock in LA. I mean, again, that type of guy that can wear a couple of different hats. If you could find that guy, that would be perfect. And I would say this, football is the ultimate copycat sport. I've been a coach for 30 years. I know I've taken plenty from others and people have taken from us. But from my perspective, I would study Todd Monken in that Baltimore offense because conceptually you can take a lot from that system and implement it into this system. And that's, again, the beauty of what the Patriots did for 20 plus years with the flexibility of this offense. You can blend some of those concepts in, like you and I were saying, Alex, about the pistol.
Yeah.
Study that offense. What is Monken doing? What was Greg Roman doing in Baltimore now with the Chargers? Like, there's some good stuff there. Go back to the 49ers with Jim Harbaugh when he was there and they had Kaepernick. There's some good stuff there that you can run and utilize and take advantage of Drake May's athleticism. Mike checks in. Yes. So he's pretty excited about McDaniels and what we're talking about. Good friend of the show, Bill Vaughn, checks in. Seems like a fullback can also be used as a push-tush guy the league is trending towards. Yeah. I mean, Since that play is not going to be banned, everybody and their mother's going to run it. Might as well put it in. And then Boston Sports Archive, which I think this is a great idea. If you can somehow pull it off, trade for Jacoby Myers. Thanks for checking in. We greatly appreciate it. Is that something they can do? I would love that because he'd be a great fit in this system.
I mean,
we know that.
Yeah, he's such a good tool for a young quarterback.
Yeah,
like a guy that's just
going to want to part ways
that reliable
and
and
he's
all that. Like,
right.
Assuming they draft a guy, which I would assume they're going to do. Like, that's the exact kind of wide receiver I want my rookie quarterback to have. And, they got rid of Devontae Adams. They don't really have anybody else outside of the tight ends. You'd probably need to give them like a premium asset to do that. And at that point, draft your own guy or use that asset somewhere else. They have too many rosters. I like Jacoby. He's a hell of a player. They made a mistake letting him get away a couple of years ago, but I don't think like you need Jacoby Myers to make this work.
Yeah, I don't think
there's sorry, Kevin. I think the bigger thing is you got to find the right wide receivers coach so you can find your own. You can find and develop your own Jacoby Myers, right?
Yeah. No, I was gonna say I don't think there's a shot they get rid of him. But let me ask you guys about another name. Kendrick Bourne was recruiting Cooper Kupp today. Any shot? I don't think there is, but
I think there's going to be a lot of veteran wide receivers that could be available for the right price, whether it's him or Hill, possibly A.J. Brown. Obviously, we know the Vrabel A.J. Brown connection from Tennessee. But again, to Alex's point, you're going to have to pay a premium price, I think, for any of those guys. They're not going to give them away. And Tyreek Hill might be the cheapest option in that group.
I couldn't be less interested in Tyreek Hill, if we're being honest. He's going to be 31 years old, had a down year last year. He's dealing with wrist issues, hasn't been good in the cold in a few years. You're going to need to do that here. You're going to have to give up a haul to a team in your division. They should look elsewhere. Although, Kevin, you mentioned Kendrick Bourne. If we're talking about like the winners and losers from this, Kendrick Bourne was on 1,000-yard pace in 2021 before he got COVID late in that season. And that was with Mac Jones as his quarterback. That's right. Now look, 4 years, a long time in the NFL. He's 3 seasons and a torn ACL removed from that happening. But I think this is really good for Kendrick Bourne, and I would not write Kendrick Bourne out of the Patriots' plans for this season.
No, and I think one of the things people need to realize is I think if you ask some of the guys that were on that team in 21 that are still here, I bet you privately they would tell you they're pretty happy with this hire.
Oh, yeah. Just look at Bourne's reaction on social media today. He was thrilled. So, and Alex, real quick, you mentioned, Jacoby's the kind of guy you'd like to have for a rookie quarterback. I hope Kendrick Bourne can turn into that sort of dependable guy for Drake May because, we've all covered him. He's a great guy in the locker room. Teammates love him. He was a stand-up guy this year as well, addressing a lot of the issues going on with the team. So, I'd love to see him have a bounce back year this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think stylistically, he's not that guy. Like, he's a big play threat. He's not a chain mover. So I'm just talking about like on the field, the guy that when 3rd and 5, got to have it. I know Jacoby is going to be in his spot. He's going to be open. He's going to catch the ball if I put it on him. Not that Kendrick Bourne can't do that stuff, but he's a guy throwing the ball down the field too. He's a guy you're creating explosives with. So I think ideally, Jalen Polk would kind of snap back and be the guy that we thought he was going to be, which was essentially Jacoby Myers. That was everybody's comp for him in the draft. But if not, just going out and finding that the slot receiver doesn't need to be a big play threat. They still need a big play threat. And this is something I worry about McDaniels. They were always hesitant to get that like true number one coverage dictating X receiver. They did it once with Brandon Cooks and the results were unbelievable. So and maybe with May, slightly different stylistically, they go out and do that now. That guy to me is your big play threat. To me, the slot receiver is 3rd and 5. I know he's going to be in the right spot at the right time and make a play on the ball. Like that's what I think you're looking for from that position.
Obviously, one of the bigger stories of the weekend was that the Patriots also retained special teams coordinator Jeremy Springer. That was announced yesterday. Just some thoughts on that.
I like it. I thought the special teams unit looked at their hiccups last year, right? The game at Jacksonville, but especially for a first-time NFL coordinator, that was a good unit. They did their part.
PFF had him ranked 2nd.
Right, for the people who want to put stock in that. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? That unit was good enough. Vrabel has a relationship with Tom Quinn, who's the assistant special teams coordinator, who I would think probably vouches for Springer, keeps his own job. That hasn't been reported yet, but you would think that if Springer's staying, his assistant, who Vrabel's familiar with, is also staying. So that made a lot of sense. Keep the momentum there. I thought that was probably one of the easier decisions Mike Vrabel's had to make.
Yeah, no, that's an easy one. Continuity remains. You had an all-pro and Brendan Schooler under him. Just, again, sort of a no-brainer for me, just to keep that continuity on board.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. 3 for 3. It's not only the continuity, but I think his passion, Coach Springer's passion, you see it when he's out there. And hey, everybody loved when he met with the media once a week. He's always a great quote, great to deal with, gets it. He's got a bright future in this game. I mean, if he keeps his trajectories as he could be a potential head coach down the road, I think you're going to see more special teams guys get that opportunity. I think it was the right move. And look, continuity matters, but it's not the worst thing in the world to keep some of the guys that were previously on the staff. A couple of comments coming in here. Boston Sports Archive. Patriots need to get 2 capable tackles before they do anything else, in my opinion. I think we would all universally agree there. That's still their number one priority, offensive line.
Yeah, and it just the roster as a whole. Like, coaching was an issue last year. Absolutely. Running it back with the same roster with Mike Vrabel is not going to do anything. You might win 1 or 2 more games. It's a players' league. The players set the ceiling more than the coach does. So tackle, receiver, pass rusher, safety. I'll have something out tomorrow on 98.5thesportshub.com on their biggest needs for the offseason. I just need to go rewrite it because now they have a coordinator and change some of the context. But yeah, at the end of the day, if they don't improve the roster, this is all for nothing. You can be excited about the Vrabel hire. I am. You can be excited about the McDaniels hire. I am. Like, that's fine. If it's still Vidarian Lowe at tackle and you're throwing at Kayshon Boutte as your top X receiver and there's nobody opposite Christian Gonzalez and nobody rushing the passer, none of this is going to mean anything.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. Bill checks back in. Thanks again for checking, Bill. Appreciate you guys. Boston Sports Archive, thank you for checking in. Bill says, I missed beginning of show, but you think Vrabel really wanted McDaniels as top choice, or is there ownership involvement? See, I'm going to say this. I think there is ownership involvement. I'm sure that this was talked about when they met with Vrabel, when they finalized things with Vrabel. That's not to say that Vrabel didn't want Josh McDaniels, but I'm sure that ownership gave him their endorsement. I also think that Bob Kraft probably left it up to Mike Vrabel, but there's no doubt, at least in my opinion, that the Krafts certainly lobbied for him and put it on the table at least.
I think Mike Reese did a really good job of framing this yesterday with Felger and Maz on 98.5 The Sports Hub. Like they've never coached together. Vrabel and McDaniels have never coached together. So it's, how does Vrabel essentially pound the table for him and say, that's my guy, right? From afar, I guess would be how he'd have to do it. Is he going to be that convinced on a coach from afar? So you figure, yeah, this is probably an ownership push, but I think, forcing him on Vrabel, I've seen some people frame it that way. I think that's too far. Look, this is Mike Vrabel's second shot as a head coach in the NFL. You usually only get 2. And he had other options. He didn't need to come here. Right? He interviewed with the Jets. He was I think he was top candidate on the market beyond Ben Johnson. If he knew he was going to get saddled with an offensive coordinator he didn't believe could do the job, I don't think he would have taken it. I don't think he would have come here. So like you said, John, I'm sure ownership pushed for it. It definitely feels like an ownership idea, but I don't think you're already getting into this thing where it's like Vrabel versus McDaniels. No. I think that's a step too far.
No, I think Josh was talked about before, and I think there's also some give and take here too. We just saw Robin Glazer step down. What was that, Saturday, I believe, or Friday, whatever it was. Maybe there's discussions here and there between the Krafts and Vrabel where it's okay, I'll do this, but you do this sort of thing. I think that could be a play here as well. So I think it's ultimately the right decision, whether it's his guy or not. Does it make it maybe awkward at first? Sure, but I ultimately think they get along fine, and it doesn't matter whose guy was who, as long as everything works out right on the field.
No, I think it was his decision ultimately, and I think he made the final decision. It was his call. I don't think Robert Kraft told him he had to hire him. I don't think there was a mandate there, but I also think that this is a strong indication that Vrabel doesn't just want to be a one-system guy. He wants a broader system than the modern West Coast offense and what the Patriots did last year. He wants to be able to do more things. I think this allows him to do more things. Look at the 4 teams that are playing for a chance to win a Super Bowl. All 4 of them are outside of the Commanders. All 4 of them, 3 of the 4 of them were preseason Super Bowl contenders, obviously. But the one thing that you can say they all have in common is a couple of those offenses have West Coast roots, but they're amongst the most diverse attacks in the league. You've got Cliff Kingsbury and what he's doing with the Commanders with that hybrid air raid West Coast offense. You got what they call the West Coast college offense with the Chiefs and the Eagles. And then you got the Bills, who are a pure multiple offense. But my point is, all four of those teams schematically are diverse. They'll run the quarterback if they need to. They're creative with the way they use motions and RPOs and their packages and personnel. I know a lot of people wanted to tap into that McVay tree, but I'm telling you, you would have wanted to put a screwdriver through your ear if you're sitting through an offense last year that sat in 11 personnel the entire game, single motion, double motion, and that's all they did. I know McVay's a really good coach, and he's a really good play caller, but the bottom line is Patriots don't have Puka Nacua. They don't have Cooper Kupp. They don't have Kyron Williams. Their skill group isn't as good. They need more diversity in terms of what they do schematically. I think this hire does that for them. Preference on defensive coordinator. That's going to be the next big hire. There's a lot of names being thrown out there. Do you have a preference there, Alex?
I know I said Terrell Williams, right?
Yeah,
from the Lions, who's with Vrabel in Tennessee. I don't need like some veteran defensive coordinator, former head coach kind of guy. Like, I want it to be Mike Vrabel's defense. Mike Vrabel's a good defensive coach, and I want him to take ownership of that unit. I want him to be involved in that unit. So to me, it's getting somebody who knows how he wants things done, who's familiar with him, and also maybe getting a coach who hasn't been a head coach before and somebody you can maybe develop into a head coach to show other coaches around the league, hey, there's a pipeline here. And then, you get a year, 2, 3 down the road, you have to replace coaches. Now you're more of a draw. So that was kind of my preference. I know that's sort of vague. I'll be honest, like, I did very little preparation for Mike Vrabel, defensive coordinator. Matt McCarthy asked me on the air last Sunday when Vrabel got hired. We did the whole offense coordinator thing. And he goes, oh, and who'd you want for defense corner? I'm like, I didn't even think of it because I trust Mike Vrabel to just handle it. So I would think it's going to be somebody he's familiar with. Yeah, I know there's been a couple names thrown out of guys he worked with in Tennessee. And I think that's indicative of the fact that it's going to be his defense, which I think is the right decision.
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page here. After last year, when you had a defensive head coach that didn't know or couldn't adjust, I fully trust Mike Vrabel's decision-making on defense and whoever he picks at this point.
All right. Yeah, I agree with you guys in that regard. I will say, though, I'm curious to see what they do with the position coaches more than anything else, because I think
wide receivers coach is a massive hire. That's a massive hire now.
Huge.
And I mean, you got to look at Chad O'Shea, who McDaniels has experience with, who Vrabel's with last year in Cleveland. Yeah. Wes Welker would make some sense. He has experience with Vrabel. He's done a good job as a wide receivers coach. No connection, but I think Sean Jefferson is just a hell of a coach. And that's a guy that, assuming New York turns things over, would be somebody to look at. And I'll give you one more name. I don't know how realistic this is, but this is just in my research. Vrabel was teammates in Pittsburgh with Hines Ward, who is currently the head wide receivers coach at Arizona State. Yeah. So I wonder, you want that former player.
I think Hines is a terrific coach, and he was a terrific player. So I think he'd make a lot of sense too.
I don't know. Like, again, they played together in Pittsburgh. That's it. It was 20-something years ago. They've never coached together. I don't know how much Vrabel knows him as a coach, but he is, I know in the college circles, he's considered like one of the better wide receivers coaches. Or I'll give you one more name too. I was bringing this guy up. Holman Wiggins.
Yeah.
So I don't know how available he'd be. He was the wide receivers coach at Alabama for a while. He was there from 2019 to 2023. Yeah. And I remember talking to people down there when O'Brien got hired 2 years ago and being like, well, all right, the Patriots can't develop wide receivers. Why don't they just go get this guy that's doing it at Alabama, right? Belichick, Saban, that connection. And that was like the one guy Saban wouldn't let leave, and he even made him an assistant head coach. So he's currently the receivers coach and co-offense coordinator at Texas A&M. He's good enough for Saban. He's good enough for me. I don't know if he wants to make the jump to the pros or anything like that, but I've heard nothing but terrific things about the guy.
Yeah, it's a shortened show this week, so we only got a couple minutes left here. Just some thoughts real quick on the national championship game, the 12-team playoff, and can Boston College potentially enter that fray someday?
Yeah, so last night, that first drive, I was blown away. I'd never seen Ohio State's defensive line get pushed around like Notre Dame did, but It turns out that was it. And I think Riley Leonard got, really banged up on that drive. I think it hurt him for the rest of the game. They kept trying to go back to that QB power. You felt like it was maybe all they had that they felt good about. But look, Ohio State had the best roster in the nation. That was clear in August. I think they won in spite of Ryan Day, not because of him. And it's the new era, right? Whoever buys the best roster is going to have a great shot. You just can't screw it up because they were the most talented team in every single game they played this year. Good for them. Will Howard might end up being a first-round pick. He might get a little J.J. McCarthy effect here after that run. As for BC, the ACC is wide open. I don't think there's any team in the ACC that's that great, and that includes Clemson. So BC, if they don't trip over themselves like they did last year, in theory, they'll have a chance. You just have to win the conference and you'll be in. That's a program that has a history of tripping over itself and not being super consistent. So O'Brien will have to fix that.
I'll start with BC, John, as the Ohio State guy. I'll let you close this out. Decent game early on, at least I thought it was going to be, but Ohio State was clearly the better team from the jump. In terms of BC, yeah, they can. Their schedule is a nightmare this year, though. Some of their home games include Clemson and Notre Dame. So figure out the quarterback position first. I still think Grayson James is QB1, but that competition will be interesting. Can they? Yes. I just don't know if they're going to have the depth until we get a few more Bill O'Brien classes in there. But can they? Sure. Will they? I doubt it.
Yeah. And first things first, you hit the nail on the head, Stone. I'm a big Buckeyes guy. I've been since I was in middle school. Super pumped that they won it. I will push back, though, that they won it because they bought the best roster. Let's not forget that defense was littered with four-year guys. They all chose to come back to chase a national championship. So, yes, they spent the money on McLaughlin and Downs and Junkins, obviously, and Will Howard. But outside of those guys, the majority of that roster was recruited and already on campus, and they won with those guys. And ultimately, that proved to be the difference. Real quick before we wrap up here, one last comment. Acid Bath Archive asks, great name, would you draft Abdul Carter at 4 or trade down if he's gone? Barth, put your GM hat on. What would you do?
Trade down. They need more assets. Absolutely trade down. See if you can get to like 6 with the Raiders, get a tackle, and then you get another top 100 pick. They don't just need one good player. They need 5 or 6 good players in this draft. So the more higher picks you have, I don't think Carter's Micah Parsons. I don't think he's Myles Garrett.
No,
he's a really good player, but I think he's like a step below that. I'm not going to lose sleep if they pick up a future first-round pick passing on Abdul Carter.
Agreed.
Yeah, no, I love Carter, and I wouldn't have a problem with them taking him at 4, but I am coming around to the notion that if you can get out of this pick, like you said, you just have too many holes to fill, and that's going to be the draft and trades are going to be your best avenues towards rebuilding this roster. I still think free agency is going to be a tough sell when it comes to the Patriots. Yeah. All right, Alex, I want to say thank you for taking the time, my friend. Great to see you. Always appreciate having you on. Let's do this again soon. Kevin, thanks for taking the time as always, my friend. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks,
guys.
All right, that'll do it for this week's episode of the New England Football Show. For Alex Barth, Kevin Stone, I'm John Serenitas. We'll be back on our normal night next Monday night. Until then, be safe. Peace.
See ya.